Before we dive into this epic tale, drop a quick hi in the comments. It helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. Trust me, you're going to want to share this one. The bridge of the Velter Dreadnought Supremacy pulsed with crimson light. Commander Zexathara, his chitinous armor gleaming like polished obsidian, leaned over the holographic display, his 6 eyes focused on the transmission crackling through the speakers. "Commander," the voice hissed through static, "we have completed the harvest on Kethmer. 437 humans secured." Zexathara's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "Excellent, Lieutenant Veruk. Any notable specimens?" "Mostly broken civilians and a few former soldiers. There's one. Curious case. Male. Designation 774 Alpha. Complete psychological collapse. The guards call him the Ghost. He hasn't spoken in months. Perfect for the labor camps. Process him with the others. Through the viewports of the Supremacy, 4 to 7 Velter." Warships hung in formation like metallic spiders against the void. The largest military fleet the galaxy had seen in decades. But they had no idea who they'd just captured. The harvest convoy stretched across space like the spine of some ancient predator. 12 massive ships connected by energy tethers, each one dragging prison modules filled with human cargo. Inside Transport Module Delta 7, the air reeked of fear, sweat, and resignation. 400 humans pressed together in cages barely large enough for half their number. Some wept silently, others stared at nothing with hollow eyes, a few still showed defiance, but that would be broken soon enough. In the corner of Cell Block 7, a man sat motionless against the metal wall, prison designation 774 Alpha. Though the guards just called him the Ghost, he appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and a face carved by years of unimaginable loss. His prison uniform hung loose on his skeletal frame. Marcus Kane had once commanded the most powerful military force in human history. Now he was just another broken prisoner, forgotten and discarded. "Hey, old man," a young voice whispered beside him. "You got a name?" Kane's eyes remained fixed on the distant stars visible through a crack in the hull. He didn't respond. Hadn't spoken to anyone in 7 months, 3 weeks, and for days. Not since the last transmission from Earth had gone silent. The young man, barely 18, with the soft features of someone who'd never seen real combat, pressed closer. "I'm Tommy. Tommy Chan. My dad was Admiral Sarachan of the New Terra Colony Fleet. Maybe you knew him." Kane's fingers twitched. "Just barely. The Chan family name was like a ghost from another life." "The guards say you're brain dead," Tommy continued, his voice dropping to barely audible. "But sometimes I see your eyes tracking the guards, like you're cataloging, watching, planning." A Velter guard approached their cell, its 8-foot frame casting shadows through the bars. Its voice came through translation speakers, cold and mechanical. "Feeding time. Meat." The guard threw a packet of nutritional paste through the bars. It splattered across the floor. "Enjoy your last decent meal. Tomorrow you begin rock breaking on Kethmer." The guard's laugh was like grinding metal. "The Ghost there gets the honor of deep core drilling. Now he'll last a week in the mines." As the guard moved away, Kane's hand moved almost imperceptibly. His fingers tapped against his leg in a complex pattern. Tommy watched, fascinated. As the tapping repeated 3 times, it was old Earth military code, a message no Velter would recognize. "Still here, still fighting. Wait for the signal." But Tommy couldn't read it. No one could. Marcus Kane, former Supreme Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force, architect of humanity's greatest victories and its final defeat, was utterly alone with his secrets. The transport shuddered as it entered Kethmer's gravity well. Through the viewports, the prison planet came into view, a massive asteroid converted into the galaxy's most secure detention facility. Automated weapon platforms bristled from its surface like mechanical thorns. 50,000 human prisoners, a monument to Velter efficiency. As the transport docked, Kane finally moved. His head turned slightly, just enough to see the docking bay through the small viewport. His eyes, which had seemed dead for months, suddenly blazed with calculation. He recognized something, some detail invisible to everyone else. The docking clamps that secured their transport were human-designed, old Earth military standard, which meant somewhere in this asteroid, buried beneath years of Velter modifications, was something that had once belonged to them. For the first time in almost 8 months, Marcus Kane felt something besides despair. He felt hope. The processing center of Kethmer, was a symphony of efficient brutality. Prisoners were cataloged, classified, and assigned to work details with mechanical precision. The Velter had turned dehumanization into an art form. Kane shuffled through the line with the others, maintaining his broken facade while his mind absorbed every detail. Guard rotations, weapon positions, structural weaknesses. The tactical mind that had once orchestrated the defense of 12 star systems was quietly mapping every inch of his prison. Designation 774 Alpha, the processing droid announced. Classification, psychological damage, severe. Utility rating, labor grade 7, assignment, deep core mining, sector 12. Life expectancy for 0.7 months. Kane was herded into Block Delta 7 with 23 other prisoners. His cellmates were a mix of civilians and broken soldiers, all bearing the hollow expressions of people who'd lost everything, but three faces caught his attention. Former Sergeant Maria Santos, whose steady eyes still held military discipline. Captain James Wright, missing his left arm, but sitting with perfect posture. And technical specialist Rebecca Torres, whose fingers never stopped moving, constantly calculating, analyzing. They didn't recognize him. Why would they? Admiral Marcus Kane was supposed to be dead, killed in the final battle for Earth 7 years ago. The man sitting before them was just another broken prisoner. For 6 weeks, Kane maintained his act. He worked the mines in silence, moving tons of rock with methodical precision. The guards ignored him. The other prisoners gave him space. He became invisible until the accident. It happened during a routine deep core drilling operation in Sector 12. Kane's team was boring through a particularly dense section of asteroid when their drill broke through into an unexpected cavity. Emergency lights flashed as the drilling platform shook. Cave-in. Someone shouted, "Everyone back." But as the dust settled, it wasn't a cave-in they'd found. Through the hole in the rock face, artificial lights glowed. Metal corridors stretched. In the darkness, they found a ship. Guard Captain Murdoch arrived within minutes, his crimson armor clanking as he surveyed the discovery. Fascinating. What do we have here? Kane moved closer, still maintaining his shuffling, broken gait, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the exposed hull. The design was unmistakable, angular, functional, built for war, and there, barely visible beneath layers of asteroid dust, were faded letters. IHS Retribution. Kane's blood ran cold. He knew that ship had served aboard her during the Kepler campaign. She was one of 12 dreadnoughts in the Lost Golden Fleet, humanity's most advanced warships, thought destroyed in the final battle. But here she was, entombed in rock, waiting. "Sir," one of the guards reported, "preliminary scans show the ship's hull is intact. Massive salvage value. The Velter High Command will be very pleased." Murdoch's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Indeed. Select a work detail to begin salvage operations. I want that ship stripped and cataloged within the month." As the guards discussed logistics, Kane made a decision that would change everything. For the first time in 7 months, he spoke. "I volunteer." The words came out as a croak, barely recognizable as human speech. Every head turned toward him in shock. Murdoch's eyes narrowed. "The ghost speaks. Interesting. And why would you volunteer? Meet." Kane had to think fast. His cover story needed to be believable. "Ships. Remind me of before, when we had ships. Want to touch something human again." It was perfect, pathetic enough to be believable. While explaining his interest in the salvage operation, Murdoch laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "How touching. Very well. Ghost, you can crawl through the wreckage and dream of your dead civilization. But if you slow down the operation, you'll be recycled." As the guards organized the salvage detail, King caught the eyes of Santos, Wright, and Torres. For just a moment, his mask slipped. They saw something in his gaze, intelligence, purpose, command, authority, recognition flickered across their faces. That night, in the darkness of their cell, Santos whispered, "Sir, is it really you?" King looked around carefully, ensuring no surveillance was active. Then, in a voice they remembered from a dozen battlefields, he said, "Sergeant Santos, good to see you're still alive." The effect was electric. Wright straightened. To attention, Torres' eyes went wide. Even the civilian prisoner sensed something had changed. "But sir," Wright whispered urgently, "they said you died in the battle for Earth. The entire Golden Fleet was destroyed." Kane's smile was grim. "Reports of our death were greatly exaggerated, Captain, and tomorrow, we're going to prove it. IHS Retribution was a tomb of memories. Kane led the salvage detail through corridors he'd walked 1,000 times, past battle damage from conflicts that had shaped the galaxy. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on bulkheads scarred by plasma fire. The ship's atmosphere was still intact, kept stable by automated systems that had run for 7 years without maintenance. The Velter guards spread out through the ship, cataloging weapons and technology while human prisoners did the actual work of stripping components. Kane had positioned himself and his trusted team near the command section, claiming the main computer core would have the most valuable salvage. But salvage wasn't what he was after. Torres, he whispered as they worked, I need you to create a distraction, something to draw the guards away from this section for 10 minutes. What kind of distraction, sir? Use your imagination, just make it loud and far from here. 20 minutes later, an explosion echoed from the ship's engine room. Emergency alarms began wailing, as Torres' accidental overload of a power coupling sent sparks cascading through the lower. Next, guards rushed toward the disturbance, shouting orders in their harsh language. Kane was alone with the main computer. He approached the central command console, a familiar interface he'd used countless times during the war. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from hope. If the ship's AI core was still intact, if the quantum encryption was still active, if his command codes were still valid. He placed his palm on the biometric scanner. The console hummed to life. Biometric scan complete. Identity confirmed. Admiral Marcus Kane, Supreme Commander, United Earth Defense Force. Authorization level, Omega Black. Kane closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the familiar voice of the ship's AI. Hello, Aria. Status. Report. Admiral Kane, it is extraordinary to see you alive. Current ship status, critical damage to all primary systems, hull integrity at 6 to 7%. Weapons offline. However, all core systems remain functional, including quantum. Communications array. How long have you been waiting here? 2,847 days, 14 hours. 23 minutes since last contact with Command Authority. Admiral, I must report. I have been monitoring Velter communications. The situation is dire. Kane's jaw tightened. How dire? Human resistance has been systematically eliminated across all known colonies. 17 worlds sterilized, estimated human population remaining less than 2 million, scattered across hidden facilities. However, Aria paused. I have detected quantum signatures suggesting some elements of the fleet survived the final battle. Kane's heart raced. His desperate gambit at Earth, scattering the remaining fleet to unknown coordinates, might have actually worked. Aria, I need you to activate Emergency Protocol 7. Admiral, Protocol 7 is a last resort signal that will reveal the ship's location. To every intelligence service in the galaxy, the Velter will know you're alive. Good. It's time they remembered why they were afraid of us. Send the signal. Confirmed. Initiating quantum burst transmission on all human emergency frequencies. Deep within the Retribution's core, systems that had slept for years surged to life. A quantum signal, encrypted with codes only human ships would recognize, burst across the galaxy at faster-than-light speed. The message was simple. Admiral Marcus Kane alive. Location Kefmer Prison Facility. Request immediate extraction and fleet rally. Authorization Omega Black. The fleet remembers. As the signal propagated across space, Kane felt something he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't alone anymore. Aria, maintain stealth mode and monitor all communications. If anyone responds to our signal, I need to know immediately. Understood, Admiral. If I may, it is good to have you back in command. Kane smiled for the first time in nearly 8 months. It's good to be back. In the distance, he could hear the guards returning from Torres' distraction. Time to resume his role as the broken prisoner. But now he had purpose. Now he had hope. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, hidden fleets were receiving his message. The ghost was about to become very real. The response came 18 hours later. Kane was working in the mines, maintaining his fouet of broken compliance, when Aria's voice whispered through a nearly inaudible subharmonic frequency only he could hear. Admiral, we have responses. 12 separate quantum signatures acknowledging receipt of your transmission. Fleet elements are mobilizing. Kane's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression blank as he continued moving rocks. Details? Admiral Sarachan, commanding New Terra Colonial Fleet, 15 vessels. Captain Miguel Santos, Haven Station, 7 ships plus support craft, Commander Elena Vasquez, Ghost Wing Squadron, 6 stealth frigates, and Admiral. You're not going to believe this one. Try me, Commodore Alexander Kane, IHS Defiance. Your son is alive, sir. Kane's hands trembled so violently he had to stop working. His son, Alexander, had been commanding a destroyer group in the Outer Rim when Earth fell. Kane had assumed. Sir, Sergeant Sanos whispered beside him. You all right? Kane took a shuddering breath. More than all right, Sergeant. Tell the others, we have friends coming. But as Kane celebrated privately, events were accelerating beyond his control. The Velter weren't stupid. Their deep space sensors had detected the quantum burst from Kethmer, and their intelligence division was very good at their job. In the command center of the orbital platform above Kethmer, Commander Zexathara studied the sensor logs with growing alarm. Lieutenant, explain to me how a quantum communication burst originated from within this facility, sir. Our analysis suggests the signal came from the human ship, discovered in Sector 12. We're investigating the possibility of activated AI systems. Zexathara's mandibles clicked ominously. And what was the content of this transmission? Encrypted, sir. But our codebreakers are confident they can. I don't care about the encryption. Zexathara snapped. I care about who sent it. Pull up the prisoner files for everyone assigned to that salvage detail. The holographic display filled with prisoner data. Zexathara's 6 eyes scanned the faces until they stopped on one particular file. Designation 774 Alpha, the Ghost. Real name, unknown. Captured on Kepler 7. No military records. Zexathara leaned closer. Too convenient. Run a full biometric analysis on this prisoner immediately. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, human fleets were converging on Kethmer. Admiral Sarachan stood on the bridge of the new Terra, her weathered face grim with determination. ETA to Kethmer, she asked her tactical officer. 4 to 7 hours at maximum burn, Admiral. Push it harder. Marcus Kane didn't survive 7 years in hell just so we could arrive delayed. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to all fleet elements. Full battle configuration. We're going to war. The other fleets received similar orders. Haven Station support vessels loaded with rescue equipment. Ghost Wing Squadron activated their stealth systems and began infiltration runs and approaching. From the outer system, moving at combat speed, came the IHS Defiance, Alexander Kane's ship, bearing the scars of 100 battles, but still flying the colors of the United Earth Defense Force. But back on Kethmer, time was running out. The biometric analysis had finished, and Zexathara stared at the results in disbelief. Impossible. Run the scan again, sir. I've run it 3 times. The results are consistent. Prisoner 774 Alpha is Admiral Marcus Kane, former Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Force. Genetic markers match archived samples from the war. Zexathara felt something he'd never experienced before. Genuine fear. Marcus Kane was the human who had held 13 star systems with half the ships the Velter possessed. The tactician who had turned every Velter victory into a Pyrrhic disaster. The legend who had supposedly died taking half the Velter home fleet with him. And they'd had him in a prison cell for 8 months. Alert High Command immediately and double the guard on Block Delta 7. If Kane is here, if he sent that signal. Zexathara paused. A terrible realization dawning. They're coming. The human fleet survived. And they're coming for him. As if summoned by his words, proximity alarms began wailing throughout the facility. Long-range sensors had detected incoming ships. Lots of them. 47 vessels dropped out of hyperspace. At the edge of the Kethmer system, Earth ships, scarred by years of running battles, but still deadly. At their head flew the new Terra, Admiral Sarachan's flagship. Chen opened a channel on all frequencies. Attention Kethmer facility. This is Admiral Sarachan of the United Earth Defense Force. You are holding Admiral Marcus Kane and 49,000 human civilians as illegal prisoners. You have 1 hour to release them unharmed, or we will take them by force. Zexathara's response was immediate. Admiral Chen, you are outnumbered 3 to 1. My defense fleet consists of 147 vessels. Surrender now, and I will consider allowing your people to die quickly. Chen's laugh was cold. As Space Commander, you seem to be under the impression that we came here to negotiate. We didn't. She cut the channel and turned to her tactical officer. All ships, battle formation. Target their command platforms first. And someone give me a line to Marcus Kane. It's time to bring the Admiral home. In his cell on Kethmer, Kane felt the vibrations of ships launching through the asteroid's structure. Arya's voice whispered urgently in his ear, "Admiral, the cavalry has arrived. Fleet strength 4 to 7 ships versus approximately 150 Velter vessels. Tactical analysis suggests, I know the odds, Arya. Send a message to Sarah Chen. Tell her to implement Strategy Omega." "Sir, Strategy Omega hasn't been used since the Battle of Procyon. The risk to civilian populations. The risk to 50,000 prisoners if we lose is total annihilation. Send the message." As the first shots of the battle began lighting up space around Kethmer, Kane finally dropped his mask completely. He stood in his cell, no longer the broken prisoner, but once again the Admiral who had never lost a battle. He chose to fight. Sergeant Santos, Captain Wright, Specialist Torres. It's time to remember who we are. The 3 veterans snapped to attention with precision. That made the other prisoners step back in awe. "Sir, yes, sir. We have 47 ships incoming, and about 10 minutes before this place becomes a battlefield. I need you to organize the prisoners. Anyone with military experience takes command of a cell block. Anyone with technical skills reports for engineering duties. Everyone else follows orders without question." "What's the plan, sir?" Wright asked. Kane's smile was sharp as a blade. "We're breaking out of hell, Captain, and we're taking everyone with us." As if responding to his words, the asteroid shuddered as the first Velter ships exploded in the darkness above. The Battle of Kethmer had begun. The space around Kethmer became a hurricane of plasma fire and twisted metal. Admiral Chen's fleet had arranged itself in the classic human formation Kane had pioneered, a defensive sphere that could concentrate fire in any direction while protecting the smaller support vessels. It was a formation the Velter had learned to fear during the war, but they still had numerical superiority, and their commander was no fool. All ships, enveloping formation, Skeletal commanded from his flagship, forced them to divide their fire, target their supply vessels first. Without ammunition and repairs, even human ships will fall. The Velter fleet spread out like a closing fist, trying to surround the human formation. Plasma torpedoes and particle beams lit the darkness. As the two forces engaged on the New Terrace Bridge, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with the calm of a veteran commander. "Status report. 3 Velter destroyers destroyed, sir. We've lost the Haven's Pride and New Destiny. The Defiance is engaging their flagship." Chen nodded grimly. Alexander Kane was every bit his father's son, aggressive, brilliant, and utterly fearless. But the math was still against them. Open a channel to the Retribution. "Mum, the Retribution was destroyed 7 years ago. Just do it, Lieutenant." Deep within Kethmer, Arya's communication systems came online. Kane's voice, transmitted through quantum encryption directly to Chen's flagship, came through clearly. "Sarah, good to hear your voice again. Marcus, you magnificent bastard. I thought you were dead. I got better. What's your tactical situation? 45. Ships operational, facing 138 Velter vessels. We can hold for maybe 20 minutes before the numbers become decisive." Kane closed his eyes, his tactical mind racing through possibilities. The old him would have found a way, some brilliant maneuver or unexpected gambit. But he was older now, wounded, and working with limited resources. "Unless, Sarah, I need you to do something insane." "I'm listening. Break formation. Scatter your ships and make a run for the outer system. Make it look like you're retreating. Marcus, if we scatter, they'll pick us off one by one. Trust me. Give me 15 minutes. Then come back on my signal. And Sarah, when you come back, bring everything you've got." Chen hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then, "You heard the Admiral. All ships, execute scatter pattern Delta. We are withdrawing." The human fleet broke apart like dandelion seeds in the wind, each ship racing for the edge of the system. The Velter fleet followed, exactly as Kane had predicted they would. Zexathara's laughter echoed across his bridge. "Pathetic. The humans. Run at the first sign of real resistance. All ships, pursue and destroy. Don't let a single one escape." But as the Velter fleet chased the retreating humans, Kane was implementing the most desperate plan of his career. "Arya, can you access the asteroid's main computer network?" "Yes, Admiral. The Velter have integrated their systems with the original human infrastructure. I can penetrate their security protocols." "Good. I need you to take control of the mining charges." Arya paused. "Sir, The mining charges are nuclear devices designed to break apart asteroid cores. If detonated simultaneously, they'll crack this rock like an egg. Do it, Admiral. There are 50,000 human prisoners on this facility. Kane's voice was steady, but his hands shook, and if we don't stop the Velter here, there will be 2 million dead humans across the galaxy. Sometimes, Arya, command means making choices no one should have to make. Understood, sir. Accessing mining systems now. In the cell blocks of Kethmer. Kane's voice echoed through improvised communication systems. All prisoners, this is Admiral Marcus Kane. In approximately 10 minutes, this facility is going to come apart. Emergency evacuation protocols are now in effect. Follow your cell block leaders to the designated sheltered areas. Stay calm, stay together, and trust your training. Sergeant Santos looked at him in horror. Sir, you're going to blow up the prison, with us inside it. Kane's expression was granite. No, Sergeant, I'm going to blow up the prison and trust that we're tough enough to survive it. There's a difference. As the prisoners rushed through corridors toward the most structurally sound sections of the facility, Kane made his way back to the Retribution. If he was going to die, he wanted to die on the bridge of a human ship. The command chair accepted his biometric signature, and for the first time in 7 years, Admiral Marcus Kane sat in the captain's seat of a warship. Arya, status on the mining charges, all charges armed and synchronized. Detonation in 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Signal Admiral Chen. Tell her to begin her attack run. In the outer system, Sarah Chen received the signal and felt her blood turn to ice. She knew Marcus well enough to understand what he was planning. All ships, emergency about face. Maximum burn back to Kethmer. Whatever you do, don't stop for anything. Her tactical officer looked at her in confusion. Admiral, we'll arrive just as the asteroid explodes. We'll be flying straight into a debris field. Lieutenant, you obviously don't know Marcus Kane very well. Trust me, we need to be there when that rock comes apart. As the human fleet raced back toward Kethmer, the Velter fleet was caught completely off guard. They'd been pursuing scattered ships, when suddenly those same ships were accelerating back toward them in perfect formation. Sexathara stared at his tactical display in disbelief. What are they doing? This is madness. That's when the asteroid exploded. 50,000 nuclear mining charges detonated simultaneously, turning Kethmer from a solid mass into an expanding cloud of debris and superheated plasma. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Every ship in the vicinity was caught in the shock wave. Velter vessels, caught between the explosion and the returning human fleet, found themselves in the worst possible position, unable to maneuver, blinded by radiation and facing an enemy that had somehow anticipated the blast. But the human ships had been ready. Their shields were reinforced. Their crews braced for impact. Admiral Chen had positioned her fleet perfectly, close enough to use the explosion as cover, far enough to avoid being destroyed by it. All ships, fire at will, Chen commanded. Hit them while they're blind. The Battle of Kethmer became a slaughter. Blinded and disoriented Velter ships found themselves easy targets for human gunners, who had been waiting 7 years for revenge. Plasma torpedoes found their marks. Particle beams carved through armor. In 15 minutes, the Velter fleet was reduced from 138 ships to less than 20. But the real question was whether anyone had survived on Kethmer itself. This is Admiral Chen to any survivors on Kethmer. Please respond. Static. Then, crackling through the interference, a familiar voice. Sarah, this is Marcus. We're alive down here. Barely, but alive. Kane was indeed alive, sitting in the command chair of the Retribution as emergency lights flickered around him. The ship's hull had held, protecting the few hundred humans who had taken shelter in its most heavily armored sections. Casualties? Chen asked. Kane's voice was heavy, significant. Maybe 15,000 survivors out of 50,000 prisoners. The others, he paused. They died as humans, Sarah, not as slaves. In the aftermath of the battle, rescue ships swarmed through the debris field. Humans who had been prisoners hours before were now free, carried to safety by the fleet that had come to save them. But the victory came with a price that would haunt Kane for the rest of his life. 3 days after the Battle of Kethmer, the scattered human fleets gathered at a prearranged rendezvous point in deep space. 41 ships remain operational out of the original 47, a remarkable survival rate, given the odds they'd faced. Admiral Sarah Chen shuttle docked with the salvaged hull of the IHS Retribution. now serving as Admiral Kane's temporary flagship. As she walked through corridors that bore fresh scars from the recent battle, she wondered what she would find. The man who greeted her was both the Marcus Kane she remembered and someone entirely different. He still carried himself with the bearing of supreme command, but there were new lines in his face, a weight in his eyes that spoke of unbearable choices. Sarah. Kane embraced his old friend, as she could feel how thin he'd become, how the years had worn him down to his essential core. Thank you for coming. Did you really think we wouldn't? Chen pulled back to study his face. Marcus, what you did. 15,000 people are alive because of you, but 35,000 died because of me as well. Kane's voice was steady, but Chen could see the pain behind his eyes. Command is about making impossible choices. Sarah, I made mine. They walked to the Retribution's restored bridge, where representatives from all the surviving fleets had gathered. Alexander Kane stood at attention beside the tactical display, and Chen watched his father and son embrace for the first time in 7 years. You've grown up. Marcus said simply, I had a good teacher. Alexander's voice was thick with emotion. Dad, when we heard you were dead. I know, son, but we're here now, all of us, and we have work to do. Kane moved to the central holographic display, which showed a tactical map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Velter-controlled systems. Blue showed human colonies, and there were far fewer blue markers than anyone had hoped. Ladies and gentlemen, Kane began. Let me tell you what we're really fighting for. He activated a classified file, and the display changed to show archaeological data from dozens of worlds. 7 years ago, human exploration teams made a discovery that changed everything. We found evidence of a precursor civilization, a species that built technology we're only beginning to understand. The display showed images of massive structures buried on distant worlds, technologies that seemed to defy known physics. The Velter didn't attack us because we were expanding too fast, or because they saw us as a threat to galactic peace. They attacked us because we found something that proved they weren't the apex species they claimed to be. Admiral Santos leaned forward. What kind of technology are we talking about? Kane's expression was grim. Weapons that make our current arsenals look like stone axes. Faster than light travel without hyperspace jumps. Energy sources that could power entire civilizations. The precursors were millions of years ahead of any current species. And the Velter knew about this? Chen asked. They've been systematically destroying precursor sites for thousands of years, maintaining their position as the galaxy's dominant power. When humanity started uncovering precursor ruins, the Velter faced a choice: share the galaxy with a species that might surpass them, or eliminate us entirely. Alexander studied the display. They chose elimination. They tried to, King corrected. But they underestimated human resilience, and they made one critical mistake. Kane activated another file, and the display showed the locations of 12 hidden human fleets scattered across the galaxy. When I ordered the evacuation of Earth, I didn't just scatter our ships randomly. I sent them to specific coordinates, worlds where our archaeological teams had found the most significant precursor sites. The room went silent as the implications sank in. We've spent 7 years not just surviving, but learning, studying precursor technology, adapting it to our ships, our weapons, our defenses. Kane's smile was sharp as a blade. The Velter think they've been hunting the remnants of a defeated enemy. They have no idea they've been giving us time to become something far more dangerous. Chen stared at the tactical display. Marcus, what are you saying? I'm saying the war isn't over, Sarah. It's just beginning, and this time, we're not fighting to survive. Kane manipulated the display, showing estimated Velter fleet positions throughout the galaxy. We're fighting to win. The assembled commanders looked at each other, understanding dawning in their eyes. They hadn't come to Kethmer to rescue prisoners from a defeated enemy. They'd come to collect the supreme admiral of a human military force that was about to remind the galaxy why Earth had been feared. What are your orders, Admiral? Alexander asked. Kane looked around the room at faces that had followed him through hell and emerged ready to fight. Again, send a message to all human colonies, all hidden fleets, all survivors in Velter space. Tell them Admiral Marcus Kane is alive, the fleet is reunited, and it's time to come home. He paused, letting the words sink in, and send a message to the Velter High Command. Tell them the ghost they thought they captured sends his compliments, and he'll be collecting what they owe us very soon. The message reached Velter High Command 12 hours later. transmitted on every frequency simultaneously. It was brief, elegant, and terrifying in its simplicity. To the Velter Empire, you took our worlds. You enslaved our people. You thought you killed our hope. You were wrong. Admiral Marcus Kane and the United Earth Defense Force are coming for what you stole. We suggest you prepare accordingly. Emperor Kethaval received the transmission in his throne room on the capital world of Veltara Prime. The ancient ruler's 6 eyes blazed with fury as he crushed the message crystal in his clawed hand. Impossible, he hissed to his assembled. War Council, Marcus Kane died at Earth. We have confirmed reports, my Emperor. Interrupted Intelligence Director Verthic. Our analysis suggests the reports were inaccurate. Kane was captured at Kethmer and has now escaped with significant fleet elements. How significant? At least 50 vessels, possibly more, and my Emperor. There are disturbing reports from our border worlds. Kethaval's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. What reports? Human fleets have been emerging from deep space, not the scattered refugees we expected, but organized military formations with advanced technology. They're not running anymore, my Emperor. They're attacking. The truth was even worse than the intelligence director knew. Across the galaxy, 12 hidden human fleets were emerging from the shadows, where they'd spent 7 years preparing. Each fleet had been stationed near major precursor sites, and each had Admiral Rebecca Torres, once a technical specialist in Kane's original fleet, now commanded the Ghost Division from the bridge of the IHS Phantom. Her 15 ships moved through space like wraiths, their hulls wrapped in precursor stealth fields. That made them invisible to Velter sensors. Target acquired, her tactical officer reported. Velter supply convoy, 12 ships, minimal escort. Understood, all ships, engage cloaking systems. Let's remind them why they used to fear the dark. The attack was over in minutes. The Velter convoy never saw their attackers, never knew what hit them. They simply disappeared, leaving behind only expanding clouds of debris and a message buoy broadcasting Kane's words. The United Earth Defense Force remembers. Similar attacks were happening throughout Velter space. Admiral Carlos Mendez struck from the outer rim with ships that could jump between star systems. Without using hyperspace gates, Commander Lisa Park's Deep Space Squadron hit supply lines. With weapons that turned Velter armor into useless slag, Captain David Chang's Rapid Response Group used precursor technology to appear inside enemy formations, wreaking havoc before vanishing again. But the most devastating attacks came from an unexpected source. On the industrial world of Murdoch, millions of human slaves labored in factories that produced weapons for the Velter war machine. They had endured 7 years of brutality, maintained only enough to keep them productive. But then the signals started coming, hidden receivers, built into the slave barracks during construction by human prisoners, began broadcasting a familiar voice, Marcus Kane's voice, speaking words that ignited hope in hearts that had given up on freedom. My fellow humans, the transmission began. This is Admiral Marcus Kane. I know you thought I was dead. I know you thought help would never come. You were wrong. In Factory Complex 7, a woman named Elena Vasquez, formerly Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force, lifted her head from her workstation as Kane's voice filled the air. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are certainly not defeated. The time has come to remind our captors why humanity conquered the stars. Vasquez looked around at her fellow slaves, former soldiers, technicians, pilots, all reduced to industrial labor, but in their eyes, she saw something awakening, something the Velter had tried for 7 years to crush. In 60 seconds, Kane's voice continued, the power will go out. When it does, remember who you are. Remember what you're fighting for. And show these creatures what happens when they mistake human endurance for human surrender. The lights went out. What followed was the largest coordinated uprising in galactic history. On 17 worlds simultaneously, human slaves seized weapons from their guards, took control of industrial complexes, and began broadcasting targeting data to the hidden fleets. The Velter Empire, which had seemed unshakable for thousands of years, suddenly found itself fighting wars on dozens of fronts against an enemy that had been preparing for 7 years to take everything back. But Emperor Kethaval was not without resources of his own. Director Verthic, he commanded, activate the Omega Protocol. Verthic's mandibles clicked nervously. My Emperor, the Omega Protocol has never been tested on this scale. The consequences of not using it are the end of our empire. Do it. The Omega Protocol was the Velter's final weapon, a network of planet-killing devices. Hidden throughout their territory, if they couldn't rule the galaxy, they would ensure no one else could either. On the bridge of the Retribution, Kane watched the tactical displays as reports flooded in from across human space. Victory after victory, liberated worlds, freed populations for the first time in 7 years. Humanity was winning, but Arya's voice carried a note of alarm. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups on Velter core worlds. Pattern suggests some form of superweapon network. Kane's blood ran cold. He knew the Velter mentality. If they couldn't win, they would ensure everyone lost. Sarah, he called to Admiral Chen on the new Terra. We need to accelerate our timeline. They're preparing something that will make the stakes of this war irrelevant. What do you need? Kane looked at the strategic display, calculating odds and possibilities with a mind that had never lost a battle he chose to fight. Everything we have, every ship, every weapon, every trick we've learned from precursor technology. We're going to end this war in the next 48 hours, one way or another, and if we can't, Kane's expression was grim, then we'll die as humans, Sarah, not as slaves. As the greatest naval battle in galactic history began to unfold, Marcus came prepared to stake everything on one final gambit. The ghost that had haunted Velter nightmares for 7 years was about to become their ultimate nightmare. The endgame had begun. The assembled human fleet was a sight that would have been impossible 7 years earlier. 237 ships representing every surviving human colony, armed with technology that bridged the gap between current science and precursor mysteries. Kane stood on the bridge of the IHS Retribution, now fully restored and enhanced with precursor upgrades. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human fleet element as they prepared for the assault on Veltara Prime. Final fleet status report, King commanded. Admiral Chen's voice came through the quantum communicator. New Terra Battle Group, 31 ships, ready for assault. Ghost Division, 15 ships. Stealth systems active, reported Admiral Torres. Deep Strike Squadron, 18 ships. Jump drives charged, added Commander parked out one by one. 12 fleet. Commanders reported ready. But Kane knew the numbers were misleading. The Velter home system was defended by over 800 vessels, plus planetary defense networks that had never been breached. Arya, Kane said quietly. Probability analysis for full frontal assault. Probability of mission success, 12.7%. Probability of total human fleet destruction, 94.3%. Kane nodded grimly. Those were the odds he'd expected, which was why he wasn't planning a full frontal assault. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Kane. You've all seen the tactical analysis. We're outnumbered 4-1, attacking the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. By all conventional military wisdom, this mission is suicide. He paused, letting that sink in. Fortunately, we're not going to use conventional military wisdom. Kane activated a new display showing the internal structure of the Velter home system. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Operation Ghost Protocol. While our main fleet engages the outer defenses, 12 ships equipped with experimental precursor jump drives will micro-jump directly into the heart of the system. Their target isn't the Velter fleet, it's Emperor Kethaval himself. Admiral Sanos' voice crackled through the calm. Marcus, that's insane. Even if we could get through their defenses, we'd be stranded in the middle of their capital system. That's the idea, Miguel. The Velter have activated something called the Omega Protocol, planet-killing weapons on every major world in their territory. If we can't stop them at the source, they'll turn this war into galactic genocide. King manipulated the display to show energy signatures throughout Velter space. The Omega network is controlled from the Emperor's palace on Veltara Prime. One person has the activation codes. One person can shut it down. And how exactly do we get to the Emperor through 800 ships and planetary defenses? Asked Alexander from the Defiance. Kane's smile was sharp as a blade. By doing something so unexpected, so tactically insane, that they won't see it coming until it's too late. He activated the final element of his plan, and the assembled commanders stared in shocked silence. We're going to surrender. The message reached Emperor Kethaval hours before the human fleet arrived at the edge of his system. To Emperor Kethaval of the Velter Empire, this is Admiral Marcus Kane, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Force. I am prepared to discuss terms for the surrender of all human military forces in exchange for the guaranteed safety of human civilian populations. I will meet with you personally to finalize arrangements. Signal your acceptance, and I will approach Veltara Prime under flag of truce in his throne room. Kethaval stared at the message with a mixture of suspicion and triumph. His war council buzzed with excitement. My Emperor, Verthik hissed. This could be a trap. Of course it's a trap, Kethaval replied. The question is, whose trap is it? He considered the tactical situation. The human fleet had appeared at the edge of his system, impressive in size, but hopelessly outnumbered. A direct assault would be suicide, and Kane was too good a tactician not to know that. Very well, Kethaval decided. Inform Admiral Kane that I will receive his surrender personally. But he approaches alone, and his fleet remains at the system's edge, my Emperor. Surely you don't intend to. I intend to accept the personal surrender of the human who has caused us so much trouble. There's a certain poetic justice in it. What Kethaval didn't know was that Kane was counting on exactly that response. An hour later, a single ship detached from the human fleet and began its approach to Veltara Prime. The IHS Retribution on the bridge. Kane sat in his command chair, wearing his formal admiral's uniform, the same uniform he'd worn 7 years earlier when Earth fell. But hidden beneath the ceremonial fabric were devices that would have made Veltar security very nervous if they could detect them. Admiral, Arya said quietly, we are being scanned by every sensor array in the system. Fortunately, precursor shielding is masking our modifications. Kane nodded. The modifications were the key to everything. Microscopic precursor technology integrated into his uniform, his body, even his DNA. Technology that would allow him to do things the Veltar couldn't imagine. Time to destination, 23 minutes to orbital dock with the Imperial Palace. King closed his eyes and reviewed the plan one more time. It was insane, desperate, and depended on split-second timing across multiple fronts. In other words, it was exactly the kind of plan that had made him famous. Arya, send the coded signal to all fleet elements. Ghost protocol is active. Throughout the human fleet, 12 specially modified ships began their preparations. Each vessel had been equipped with experimental precursor jump drives that could theoretically transport them instantaneously across vast distances. The technology was untested, dangerous, and had a 30% chance of tearing the ships apart in transit. King considered those acceptable odds. On Veltara Prime, Emperor Kethaval prepared to receive his greatest enemy. The throne room had been cleared of all but essential personnel. Security was absolute. The moment Kane stepped aboard the space station, he would be completely at the Emperor's mercy. Or so Kethaval thought. The Retribution docked with the Imperial Palace under the guns of a dozen Veltar cruisers. Kane walked alone down the boarding ramp, his hands visibly empty, his bearing that of a defeated commander accepting the inevitable. Veltar guards escorted him through corridors lined with trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. Human artifacts were prominently displayed, weapons, flags, the personal effects of dead Earth generals. It was meant to intimidate, to break his spirit before he even reached the throne room. It had exactly the opposite effect. Kane studied every detail, cataloged every weakness, prepared for what was coming, because in exactly 17 minutes, Ghost Protocol would activate, and the most dangerous gamble in human history would begin. The throne room doors opened, revealing Emperor Kethaval in all his terrifying majesty. The ancient ruler sat on a throne carved from the bones of extinct species, surrounded by the symbols of absolute power. Admiral Marcus Kane. Kethaval's voice resonated through translation speakers. The ghost finally materializes. Kane approached the throne with steady steps, stopping at the prescribed distance for addressing the Emperor. Your Imperial Majesty, I've come to discuss terms. The terms are simple, Admiral. Unconditional surrender of all human military forces, disbanding of your fleets, acceptance of Veltar authority over all human populations. Kane nodded slowly, and in return, your people will be allowed to live as productive members of our empire. Slavery is such an ugly word. We prefer guided civilization. I see. Kane seemed to consider this. And what guarantee do I have that you'll honor these terms? Kethaval's laugh was like breaking glass. You have my word as Emperor. Surely that's sufficient for a defeated enemy. Kane smiled. It would be, if I were actually defeated. That's when the lights went out. Ghost Protocol activated at exactly 14:27 Galactic Standard Time. 12 human ships, scattered throughout the human fleet, simultaneously engaged their experimental jump drives. Space folded around them like origami. Reality twisted, and they vanished from the edge of the Veltar system. They reappeared inside Veltar Prime's orbital defense perimeter. The effect was devastating. Veltar ships that had been in perfect formation suddenly found enemy vessels materializing in their midst. The IHS Defiance, commanded by Alexander Kane, appeared directly above the Imperial Palace. The new Terra materialized inside the formation of Veltar dreadnoughts. Ghost Division ships flickered into existence like deadly phantoms. But the real surprise was happening in the throne room when the lights went out. Marcus Kane had vanished, not fled, vanished. In the darkness, Veltar guards fired blindly, their energy weapons illuminating glimpses of movement that seemed impossible. Kane wasn't just hidden, he was everywhere. The precursor technology integrated into his body allowed him to phase partially out of normal space-time. To Veltar sensors, he existed in multiple locations simultaneously. Their weapons passed through him like he was made of shadows. Impossible. Kethaval roared, "Secure the chamber. Find him." Kane's voice seemed to come from all directions at once. "You know, Your Imperial Majesty, I've been looking forward to this conversation for 7 years." A guard spun toward the voice and fired. His plasma bolt struck empty air. "You see, I learned something during my time in your prisons." Kethaval slumped on his throne, suddenly looking every one of his 800 years. What are your terms?" Kane's smile was sharp as a blade, but his voice carried the authority of someone who had earned the right to dictate to his enemies. Unconditional surrender. 1 year later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of New Earth Station, watching construction crews work on the newest addition to humanity's rebuilt fleet. The IHS Marcus Kane was nearly complete, a dreadnought that incorporated both human engineering and precursor technology. Magnificent ship. A familiar voice said behind her. Chen turned to see Marcus Kane approaching, though he moved more slowly than he once had. The years of imprisonment and the strain of the final battle had taken their toll, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had saved humanity. "Marcus, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow's ceremony." Kane joined her at the viewport. "Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about." Below them, New Earth bustled with activity. Humans from across the galaxy had come home to rebuild what the Veltar had destroyed. Former prisoners worked alongside former soldiers, civilians alongside veterans, all united by the shared experience of survival. "Any regrets?" Chen asked. Kane considered the question carefully. "About the war? No. About the cost. Every day, the final tally had been staggering. Of the 57 million humans who had lived in the galaxy before the Veltar invasion, fewer than 12 million had survived. Entire generations had been lost. Worlds that had taken centuries to build had been reduced to ash. But they were rebuilding, and they were making sure it would never happen again. The Veltar integration is proceeding smoothly," Chen reported. "The younger generation seems to be adapting to the new government structure. The older ones, well, change is hard for anyone. Under the treaty that ended the war, the Veltar Empire had been dissolved and replaced with a democratic federation. Human advisors worked with Veltar reformers to build a government based on consent, rather than conquest. It was messy, complicated, and sometimes frustrating. It was also working. And our friends in the outer galaxies, 3 new species have made contact in the past month. Word is spreading that humanity is different from previous galactic powers. They're curious about our approach to diplomacy." Kane nodded. The precursor sites had revealed something extraordinary, evidence that the galaxy had once been home to dozens of spacefaring civilizations. All had been gradually absorbed or destroyed by expansionist empires like the Veltar, but some had survived by retreating to the galactic rim, waiting for someone who might be different. Humanity, it seemed, was that someone. "The memorial dedication is tomorrow," Chen said quietly. Kane's expression grew somber. Tomorrow they would formally dedicate the memorial wall, a structure that listed the names of every human who had died during the occupation. 35 million names, carved in precursor-enhanced crystal that would last until the stars themselves burned out. "Will you speak, Sarah? I led those people to their deaths. 15,000 survived Kethmer because 35,000 died. What could I possibly say to honor that sacrifice?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You could tell the truth, that they didn't die as slaves, they died as free humans, and their sacrifice made freedom possible for everyone else." Kane looked out at the bustling station, at the ships being built, at the children playing in areas that had been empty space a year ago. Do you think they'd approve of what we built? Marcus, you saved our species, not just from extinction, but from becoming something we'd hate. We could have used precursor technology to become conquerors ourselves. Instead, we're using it to make sure no one else goes through what we went through. Kane smiled, the first genuine smile Chen had seen from him in years. You know what the strangest part is? For 7 years, I thought I was the ghost haunting the Velter. Turns out, I was just the messenger. What do you mean? Kane gestured toward the memorial construction site visible through another viewport. They're the ghosts, Sarah. 35 million humans who refuse to let their deaths be meaningless. They're the ones who whisper in the ears of tyrants, reminding them that oppression always has a price. They're the ones who inspire the oppressed to keep fighting, keep hoping, keep believing that freedom is worth any sacrifice. He turned away from the viewport. I was just the one who carried their message. As Kane walked away, Chen remained at the observation deck, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, new civilizations were taking their first steps into space. Others were making contact with the reformed galactic community. And throughout it all, the story was spreading. The story of the species that had refused to submit, that had turned defeat into victory, that had chosen to lift others up rather than tear them down. The story of the ghost who became legend, and a legend that became hope. In the darkness between stars, humanity's voice echoed still, not in conquest, but in welcome, not in dominance, but in partnership. The ghost had finally found peace, and that, my friends, is how the aliens learned that sometimes the most dangerous prisoner is the one who never stopped believing in tomorrow. What did you think of Admiral Kane's journey from broken prisoner to savior of the galaxy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing from fellow sci-fi fans. If you enjoyed this epic tale of human resilience and redemption, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed for more stories that explore what it truly means to be human in an infinite universe. And check out the video I've chosen for you next, another tale of humanity defying impossible odds. Until next time, remember, in the darkness between stars, hope is the brightest light of all.